Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Riverdale as well as the latest episode of Stumptown. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time to start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of Riverdale, you can skip what I had to say about this week's episode of Stumptown. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Riverdale. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, it is a Thanksgiving episode, and everyone's kind of, having Thanksgiving in, different regards. Like, obviously, let's start off with kind of Archie. Obviously, this is the first holiday without, his dad, and obviously it's a hard time for him and his mom, but they take all that, and realize, it's going to be rough, but obviously they'll get through it, and obviously they're putting a lot of effort into the center. The fact is they're going to make it open up for a lot of kids who don't have anywhere else to go. So, opening their doors and keeping it open actually so people can be, because obviously there's also a heavy storm, like ice storm coming. So don't want anyone out there like on their own during something like that. So it's kind of a nice little thing. Obviously, it's interesting because you have Hiram being kind of the Grinch, where basically he's trying to shut the center down then because he's married everything now, which I love that happened immediately. I guess there was like no one willing to run against him because it's Hiram. Plus, he has enough money and power and reputation to easily box anyone out, who tries to kind of step up to the plate in this regard. Because the last person that would try that was Fred. So, but no one else is willing to, so sadly he kind of goes on, he's kind of got full power and again, which he already had plenty of power to begin with, but nevertheless. And so, obviously, that's something that pisses Veronica off because her dad's like, you get to stay here with us, have a full, a Thanksgiving as a full family. And he's like, the fact is, it's just because of the crime and everything there. So he was like, it's nothing personal. And then Veronica pulls all the food and dishware they have on the table off the table and it lands on the floor. And she's like, nothing and I didn't do that. It wasn't personal what I just did there either. Poppy, and I'm like, nice little middle finger to him. Because it is kind of like, come on, you're literally like hurting by doing that. You're hurting like kids who have no home. It's like, could you be more of that's just not even just being a villain. That's just straight up just being an asshole, So, but the thing is, like, who was that more for and against? Was that more target against Archie or more so about Veronica because Veronica didn't want to spend any time there, with with her family, Despite even Hiram sending FP to kind of shut the place down, which even FP was like, if I were you, I'd say screw Hiram and what he's doing, which they totally say do that and keep the center open. Because obviously FP is not big into listening to Hiram again because, was already in that position where you kind of had to listen to his, following his orders, obviously with everything that went earlier on in the show where the serpents were basically used as hired muscle by Hiram. So there's that whole situation. So obviously, like, FP holds a lot of animosity towards that, but also the whole thing of like, come on, man, don't be a dick. It's the holiday season. It's Thanksgiving, a time to help people, be there for one another, and Archie's trying to be there for these kids, and you're just being a dick. So there's that whole situation. And obviously, it's like, they're gathering up. There's food and everywhere. Everyone's, it's nice, warm welcome until it turns out like, Dodger's family shows up. In particular, that actress, I feel like I've seen her, the actress who plays Dodger's mom. I'm like, I've seen her in something real recent, and I can't remember what. You see her pop up in things from time to time. I've seen that actress in something fairly recently, but I don't remember what. But regardless, they came there to start a scene because they believe that Archie, or they believe someone that's there, beat up her dear sweet Dodger. Which my thought last episode was going to be like, okay, Dodger's going to say it was Archie, even if it wasn't Archie. Either someone came at him with the mask on and beat the crap out of him, and it's like, Dodger's just going to say it's Archie, whether or not it was actually someone in a mask or not. He was going to say it was Archie, but nope, he's basically in a coma, so no telling who, really did that. But obviously they're looking to get revenge, which Archie's just trying to keep the peace with everyone. He's just trying to make sure no one else in there gets hurt and everything. And she's willing to do this But, obviously the kids kind of step up. It's like, no, it was me. I'm the one that beat up Dodger. I was wearing the mask and everything. So I thought that was kind of a sweet moment, and his mom was even kind of like, Dodger's mom's kind of like, oh, that is sweet. I'd almost shed a tear in the other moment in time, but the fact is someone's got to pay. Luckily, the turkey they were cooking inside ended up exploding, and it acted as a distraction. And Archie single-handedly took down the other two dudes. And here comes Mama Andrews with the gun being like, get out of here or I will shoot you. So I even love Archie being like, oh, when did you turn into Dirty Harry? And it's like, what was that explode? Who tried to cook that turkey in here like that? And Archie's just like, oh, everyone's like Mad Dog and Veronica are kind of smiling and laughing. And Archie's kind of looking like, kind of messed up. But regardless of all that, it was this nice moment, everyone kind of gathered, having this home-cooked meal, saying grace, just like their, Fred would. And even at the end of it all, I did like that, this has been a wild, crazy, Thanksgiving, a situation for Archie and his mom. But they think about the fact is, and at the very end, like them honoring, Fred because, obviously they miss him like crazy, and I think that was their way of kind of always keeping him alive, because for her, she's like, it wasn't just luck that happened when it happened. That situation, that turkey exploding, everything saved our lives. I think that was your dad looking out for us. It's showing that, despite everything, despite him being gone, he's always going to be there with them, always looking out for them, So I thought that was just kind of a beautiful message to kind of tie that story. And even how they ended the episode off on that, I thought was kind of beautiful. So there's that side of things. Then there's Cheryl and Tony. It's like, okay, so how are we going to dispose of your uncle's body? It's like, okay, so how are we going to handle that? It's like, okay, so they're going to use like some Blossom family lore to kind of scare her aunt and cousin away, because they're still, skulking about trying to, get a hold of, Cheryl's money and, the maple business and stuff like that, so they can sell it off, especially because they know something's up. It's like, oh, well, we haven't seen your uncle. Where is he? And blah, blah, blah. So the whole point was to kind of have this like scary Thanksgiving dinner that kind of scared them away. Which, interesting enough, I wonder, the story that Nana Rose told, I wonder, is that BS or there's some truth to that? I kind of get the feeling like there probably is some truth to that. But it's basically a story about the first Blossom family, being stuck in kind of a similar winter storm, and ended up resulting to cannibalism. And then it's like, oh, who's in this? Oh, this pie you're eating? Yeah, it's Uncle so-and-so. It's like, oh, what? And it's like her cousin had bit onto his ring, which I'm like, that's super morbid. I was like, of course you didn't act. But there was a legitimate part of my brain that was like, did you actually put him in there? I was like, no, they wouldn't. That's not the whole plan. But I'm like, the whole point is just to scare them. But there's still a part of me that's like, but did you actually put any of him in there? It's like, no. But it's like, oh, and I even love the aunt being like, no, you're bluffing. And then they roll out Jason's body to show like, yeah, we're kind of a little messed up here. Which I'm sure Cheryl doesn't feel too good using her brother as kind of a scary prop like that. But it's kind of like, it's for the greater good. So JJ would be totally okay with that. I kind of think that's kind of how Cheryl would think about it. But it was enough to kind of scare them off. Now, is it going to scare them off permanently? We'll kind of have to wait and see. But there's also the creepy thing with the doll, Julian, and like, what is that going to turn into? Like, it seemed like that. Hey, it's no longer possessed, but I'm still kind of like, yeah, I'm sure that thing's possessed. I'm curious to see what that ends up turning into, if anything. It just keeps being like that creepy doll, and it's like, I don't know what to make of that, but we'll ultimately have to wait and see. So there's that. There's FP and Alice, enjoying, their time at Pops, and lo and behold, who shows up? None other than Hiram and Hermione, and it's like, oh, and Alice is like, oh, Hermione, Hiram, why don't you sit over here? And FP's looking like, what the fuck are you doing? And even Hiram's like, oh yeah, sure thing, we'll sit over there. And then they're kind of celebrating and talking about the fact of like, oh, the fact of the matter is, when they were in high school, all they did was sit around and complain about their parents, and look at us now, we're kind of terrible parents. But FP brings up Fred of being like, yo, Fred never complained about his family. The fact of the matter is, and look what he grew up to be, a great father. We could all do with being a little bit more like Fred Andrews. So I thought that was kind of a nice touching moment between them, especially because they went to school with him and everything. All of them had like a connection to Fred. And obviously the pleasantries kind of disappear later on when Hiram has to be the dick, and it's like, yeah, oh man, FP, I'm so glad you did what I asked you to do. And it's just like, dude, I'm not your boy. I'm not going to keep doing stuff for you. Like, don't get this twisted. The fact is, I haven't forgotten about the fact that you put a hit out on my boy. Did you think I forgot about it? He's like, or did you think that I forgot about the fact that you conspired with my wife to kill me? Turns into a scuffle, and then FP breaks a bottle and is about to cut him. He's like, and I love that line from FP being like, I could do it. I should do it. Not just me and not just everyone in this room. Literally the entire town would be behind me doing this. And I think that has to speak volumes to Hiram. He has to realize, literally, which almost makes it kind of like, how the hell did you manage to become mayor? Literally, most of the town hates you. I would even make the argument that most of the town despises you because they realize you're kind of an evil douchebag. But to be fair, that's just kind of the core characters we see who kind of see Hiram for who he is. The general populace of Riverdale probably just looks at him and it's like, he's some businessman that was kind of, it said, oh, him and his family has some complicated drama. I'm like, that's probably all it is. It's still just kind of like after everything. But then again, all the evidence that kind of said like all this criminal activity kind of got thrown out the window. So none of that sticks. So most of it just looks like he's just a businessman that was kind of wrongfully being jailed and stuff for stuff he didn't do. So I guess that's kind of, like I said, the general populace, it swayed their vote towards him. Especially considering there was no one else running. Once again, that probably was more so on purpose. But everyone else within the core characters know how much of a bad guy Hiram is. Which, once again, is kind of like, the fact is Hermione went back to him makes you go like, because even, like I said, even Veronica was like, what the hell are you doing? Why would you do that, Mom? So, that's a thing, so... But it did lead to an interesting conversation between FP and Alice, because FP is like, I'm a serpent, like that kind of comes first. Now he has to play the role of being sheriff, which he wanted to do good and stuff like that. But for him, I guess he feels like he kind of got a lot more done as a serpent, because as a serpent, he didn't have to answer to no one. Well, technically, for most of the time, he didn't have to answer to one. Obviously, it was a complicated thing when he was working for Hiram, but sure. But now he feels like a sheriff, he's under Hiram's thumb, so he wants to be a serpent more so than anything. But Alice is like, well, not do both. And it's like, well, yeah, look at Hiram. He's trying to be mayor and be the criminal kingpin that he's in. So I'm curious to see what FP does with this, rolling as both sheriff and gang leader. So that's definitely going to be interesting. Kind of reminds me, just because I've had the show on my mind recently, Banshee, which once again, I will say this just because it's like that show doesn't get enough love. You should totally watch Banshee. It just reminds me of quote unquote Lucas Hood. If you've seen the show, you know why I put the quotes around it. Just like balancing between trying to be a good guy and a bad guy, and like kind of a similar thing. Which almost, honestly, I just thought about that. It's kind of a very similar circumstance, FP and Lucas Hood situation. Not directly the same. Well, almost the same, because the previous sheriff got murdered. Damn, that's actually funny when you actually think about the correlation between it. Like, they're very different, but at the same time, there's core, like, similarities I find funny in that regard. But regardless, I'm going in a bit of tangent. I'm curious to see what he ends up doing with that kind of freedom, doing his criminal stuff and all that. But I'm not necessarily, not 100% criminals, but I mean, he even said it himself. I'm curious because obviously, like, the serpents were brought in as kind of deputies, but what does that kind of mean now? Are they going to bounce between the two? I mean, that's kind of an interesting thing because we haven't seen, the serpents at all this season. We've only seen FP. So I'm curious to see like what ends up becoming of that later on down the road. We'll see. But other than that, there's also the whole situation with Jughead and Betty. Betty shows up at the school to spend time with Jughead, who brought up to DuPont like, oh yeah, why did Chippins commit suicide? Oh man, he was suffering from depression or some shit like that. Kind of giving some lame excuses to why Chippins killed himself. So there's that. Obviously, Jughead, it's not buying it. It's like literally after I bring up that point, he went to you, killed himself. But DuPont was like, oh no, he never brought up that whole ludicrous theory that you had that your grandfather wrote the first Baxter book. And so Jughead brings Betty there as kind of, hey, let's spend Thanksgiving together. And obviously, Brett's overhearing their conversation like the entitled, weirdo that he is. And then I love that whole situation of like, Jughead and because now obviously in Jughead's head it's like, okay, so this isn't Chipping's murder well, suicide couldn't have just been a suicide, or at the very least, like maybe he was being blackmailed and stuff like that. The fact of the matter is, the motive could be, the fact is the Baxter books hold a lot, that property is worth a lot of money, and so this will kind of besmirch the Baxter book name and legacy. So that's enough reason to kind of like, potentially put this whole situation forth. But nevertheless, the bit that I liked a lot was just like he was going to get stuff, and then all of a sudden Brett shows up in a rabbit mask and the axe. I thought that was going to turn into a bigger thing than it was. I thought it was going to turn into a whole chase and stuff like that. I was like, oh, that would suck. But lo and behold, what happens? Betty shows up with a golf club, whacks him over the head, and it's like I saw him walk past the room, so I was like, and then Don was like, what the hell are you doing? We're just trying to scare you. I'm like, well, you fucked up. You tried to scare the wrong people. I'm kind of like, you kind of deserve that from being assholes. But then it turns into a whole thing of like, okay, why are they still here? They kind of do, never have I ever, trying to like figure out like what the hell is going on here. Because at first Brett ends up dropping a note. It's like, wait, is this a suicide note for Mr. Chippings? It's like, no, it was a writing exercise. Oh, it wasn't part of the class assignment. It was something, outside of the curriculum. And it's like, man, you guys suck at lying too. So it turns into a thing of like, so what's the point is that they were writing that because they were here because they were trying to plant some evidence to be like, oh, this will be found later on to get. I mean, because Jughead more so than anything seems like he's the only one that asking questions about Chipping's murder. So, and suicide. Quote, it was in fact suicide because he did, but obviously he was kind of more so pushed for whatever reason that we don't know. But it's just interesting because there's the whole thing about like, oh, the perfect murder and everything. That was the story that they were supposed to be writing and everything, or still currently is. Kind of their version of the next Baxter book. So what that means in the grand scheme of things, we'll have to wait and see. But what was interesting is Jughead brought up, I forgot what was it, Quill and Stone, I think that's it, the secret society at the school and everything, and it turns out both DuPont and Chipping were a part of it. So it's like, okay, so maybe, it's that type of thing of like, tell us all your dirty secrets and kind of gets used against you. Kind of similar to the whole Edgar and the farm situation. It seems very kind of similar to that. So maybe they're saying that Chipping's deepest, darkest secret was used against him by DuPont. Who knows? But when it was all said and done, like they found, Chipping's pen in Donna's room, and when they confront her, at least when Betty does, she comes up with this whole thing of like, hey, we were having a relationship, and the fact of the matter is I told him it was over with, and then the next day he committed suicide. Which is interesting that we are back to the whole student-teacher relationship, because let's not forget about what's her name? The teacher that Archie was having a relationship with back in like the first season. So it's kind of interesting to kind of bring back a similar thing. But Betty does kind of think, man, I think that's kind of BS. Like maybe they just told us that story to kind of get us off their backs. But then there's the whole thing of like the next day when Jughead was thinking like, hey, I'll probably bring this up to the headmaster or whatever. But then it's like, okay, so because we see someone's recording them, either they're going to try and blackmail Jughead with like the recording, or they probably did it to kind of get some secret information. It's like, oh, he's going to bring this up to the headmaster, let's jump ahead of this while we have the opportunity. And so they basically smear Chipping's name to kind of make it full-blown look like a suicide by being like, yeah, me and Donna and Chipping's had his whole relationship and everything, which sucks because like they were saying like, oh, the family out of respect for the family and stuff like that, they were trying to have before that they were handling things the way they were, but now it's kind of like, oh, there's no defending him now because he's done all these terrible things. It's like, easy to frame a dead man, huh? So that turns into that whole nasty situation. Obviously, Jughead's not buying it, and obviously, Jughead and Betty love a good mystery. Definitely Betty when it comes to this whole thing, so she's piecing this whole stone wall situation, trying to figure out, what it's all about, like, why Chippings did what he did. I keep saying Chippings. Chippings. I keep saying Chippin like that, regardless. they're trying to figure whatever it is, deep dark secrets that are laid buried at this school. What deep dark secrets that he had in particular, also this society, because definitely Donna and Brett are a part of it, but I'm assuming his other two classmates are as well. Once again, it just, that whole Moose thing kind of went to the side. Part of me wonders if that's simply because the actor who plays Moose was doing the TV show Daybreak. He's I'd say like a main character in the show, so I'm wondering, is that why they just kind of like made him disappear? But once again, Donna was kind of like, oh yeah, he's doing this. I'm like, I kind of think that's BS, but we've never really circled back to be like, it is something else, so maybe not. Just the fact is also set up that Brett is his roommate and everything, especially because he's secretly recording, which is super illegal and messed up when you think about it in the grand scheme of things. But well, I assumed you were going to blackmail him, but it didn't come up the next episode, so it might have just been that headmaster information they took from it. But that might circle back in some shape or form. Like, ooh, look at this between you and your girlfriend, and try to like embarrass them both by putting it out there, like publicly, not just at the school but everywhere. Maybe not. I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where all this ultimately ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Stumptown. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode. Let's break it down. I really like the fact that this episode isn't like, high stakes in certain regards like other episodes might be. There's not like a whole bunch of like action-y stuff or whatever, or like some big like crazy case. Dex gets put on basically a political case. Basically, she's working for this one person to basically destroy another candidate's reputation and stuff like that, which I think that's just a fascinating case. For her, she's willing to take this because she's like, this dude I'm going in, looking into, Gibson, he's a piece of crap. I know he is. Why? Because all politicians are. Obviously, Gray's trying to be like, he's actually kind of a good dude. Are you because you didn't really get in this to kind of take down good people. And she's like, nah, there's no way he's a good person. Because even Ansel's like, no, I like him too. So it's like he's a good person. And obviously, Dex is going on a cover and everything, and kind of working on his campaign and stuff like that. She even kind of helps bring things alive because she ends up basically using Gray's bar as a means of kind of gathering people up and everything as a form of celebration and stuff like that. So it's pretty dope and everything. But I do love the twist when we find out that Carol was also a fellow private investigator, which I thought was kind of interesting. Side note, I had to rewind it to kind of look at her again, but I was like, yeah, that's the actress. I'm blanking on her character's name, but ABC related wise, she was on the short-lived Kevin Probably Saved the World. She played Kevin's guardian angel, which I'm like, oh my god, it's her, because it's been a while. But oh my god, that's a show I'm super bummed got canceled. I really liked that show. It was funny. It had a lot of heart to it. That's just always that's a bit of a bummer. But I was so excited to see her. Like, oh my god, that's you. Also, the fact is, when she pulled out the nightstick and everything, I'm like, oh, what's going up here? I was like, oh, this is getting scary. And it's like, oh, you're a private investigator. She knows exactly who Dex is and everything. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I thought that was fascinating. They hired multiple people to get on the inside of this campaign. I guess it's like, well, if you have enough money and power, you can make anything happen. So I guess that's kind of like get multiple people in there, kind of do their thing. So I just thought that was fascinating. I should also note too, the actor who played Gibson's husband was Anthony. He's in Black Lightning. I'm pretty sure that's the same actor who plays the metahuman who teleports. He literally popped up in this week's episode. So I just think the timing's interesting in that regard. But nevertheless, Dex ends up gets this letter from this professor who had written it to Gibson, and Gibson had held on to it. And obviously because Gibson is obviously, he's got this campaign about basically live your truth. And obviously, Dex looking into this, trying to find out what dirt he has on him. I also love the fact is that Carol went to Hoffman to try and get Dex off the case and everything. And I like Hoffman being like, hey, you're approaching and she's like, careful. He's like, your your early 30s or something like that. There's that cabin and everything you have in mind to just kind of like, haven't you decided to kind of walk away from all of this? And Carol was talking about the fact is that Dex was going to be over her head because, you're playing with big sharks, because this is a political game. It's a very nasty and gnarly game. And that turns out to be so true because with her investigation, Dex ends up finding out, thanks with help from Gray, that basically the professor had said that there was a student that, this is before Gibson had come out as gay. Dan had, there were students who kind of flocked around him. One in particular, it turns out her name is Emma. Well, it turns out she dropped out, and then sometime and later, Dan quit as well. So we end up finding out later on that she got pregnant with Dan's child. So he has a son named Jacob out there. But the thing is, his Dan's son doesn't know that, that you're my dad. The fact of the matter is, her boyfriend at the time, Emma, told her it was like, it was yours. But obviously he wasn't dad material because he ended up bouncing anyway. So for her, it's just kind of been her son, and her brother, which is even more messed up because her brother is the one who sells out the information. It's like, you betrayed your sister for some cash. That's kind of shitty. That's a shitty brother thing to do, especially considering the fact that Emma was like the only people that's been there for her and her son is her brother, and it's been the three of us. And the moment you find out you can make a good pretty penny off of this, you sell out your own daughter, your own sister, which obviously hits Dex from a different angle, because obviously it's like, for her as a sibling, as a sister, she would never sell out her brother, and she knows her brother would never sell her out. Like, they're tight knit like that. It's just kind of like, and I think maybe it also ties back to their whatever their situation is, their circumstances are with their parents. The fact of the matter is, they're so tight-knit, and it's just like, that would never happen. But to know that you would do that to your own sister, your own nephew, is super shitty. And, but regardless, obviously this is a very complicated situation that Dex finds herself in, because it's like, okay, I have this information as my job. I'm kind of obligated to turn that information in. Plus, I need the money. But obviously she doesn't want to do it because she feels guilty about it, because she knows that she's going to be imploding these people's lives. She even goes to Carol like, yo, give me what should I do? All right, we'll split the money. It's like, oh, no. You want me to kind of sign off on this so we can, the bad juju kind of flows my way a little bit. But it's like, no, I'm not doing this. From now on, I'm going to do the good jobs and stuff like that, where like reunite lost kids with their parents or something like that. Because I think Carol's been doing this for a while, and just like eventually, even she said like, basically she's got a lot of stuff weighing on her conscience for a lot of the stuff that she's done in his PI job. And Dex has always tried to do the right thing. In the grand scheme of things, she's always tried to do that. And, in her mind, it's just kind of like, she felt like, no one was going to get hurt because it's politicians, everyone's douchey. But now she realizes like, oh, wow, Dan's actually a good guy. He's not a bad guy. It's not like this is something he hid away. It was like, actually wasn't even his own choice. Emma made this choice long ago, and now it's led to this situation that they can be blackmailed in this situation. And obviously Jacob, if this information gets out there, he gets pulled into all of this. His life gets turned upside down, and he's a 15-year-old kid. He didn't ask for this. So Dex is kind of in that complicated situation, like, okay, so what do I do? She brings this up to Dan's attention. She tried to tell the other side, don't do this, but the lady, played by I think her Eliza Koo is the character, the actress's name. Interestingly enough, wasn't she in Better Call? Isn't she in Better Call Saul? I feel like this is the most recent thing I've seen her. I've seen her in other things, but that's what comes to mind first. I'm fairly certain that was her. I don't know if she's in the entire show. Like, I've only seen a little bit of Better Call Saul, but I'm pretty sure she's on like earlier stuff. I don't know if she's in later stuff too or not, but regardless, she kind of plays kind of the like evil person, or just like, oh, I'm gonna do whatever it takes to win. The guy I'm backing is probably paying her a lot of money, so it's like, oh, I'm willing, because she went out of her way to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to destroy Gibson, so that's what she wanted all this dirt for. Interestingly enough, the guy, that big time dude, that kind of one of those good cases that Dex worked on a couple episodes ago, that big time dude who was trying to get custody of his ex-wife's, their child, that dude was actually a big contributor, and because of Dex, they ended up losing his funding. So this is kind of interesting, connecting those stories like that in that regard. So I thought that was kind of fascinating. But circling back around to it, though, is that when it was all said and done, Dex does try to, fix the situation, because she can't, because Carol has said, like, no matter what you decide to do, make sure it's something you can live with. And her, and at the end of the day, I think it shows you what kind of a good person that Dex is, because she does want to try to do the right thing, So she did kind of get into this to help people. That was her main motivation. It's like, I'm actually somewhat good at this, and I can help people, So So she tries to help Dan. It's like, but there's no easy way out of this situation. So Dan promises to back out of the race for this state position, and it's like, I'll back out if you leave Emma and my son out of all of this. You never utter a word to this to anyone. They sign a contract and everything. Dude kind of extends his hand out like, oh, I never took you for a family man. Dan punches him in the face, rightfully so. But the lady there is just kind of like, oh, the fact of the matter is I've been kind of doing this for such a long time, since I was like a little kid. Like, I've enjoyed, like, she really enjoys her work and tells about like, oh, Dex, I can't wait to kind of hire you for other work, which Dex is like, nah, I'm good. I'm planning on never working with you again. Also, here's your money. It's like, well, money is money, but it's like, money, where the money comes from matters a lot for Dex, because she knows that's kind of basically blood money in a certain regard of like, she knows that's dirty money, so she's not going to accept it. So I think I'm wondering, are they going to cross paths again eventually too? Especially also her and Carol, I'm curious too, because, you know, I like that being an element of like, this is her second private investigator we've met. And it's so interesting that the stories kind of shift, not necessarily because of Dex, but maybe to a certain extent. Everything with, I'm blanking on his name now, but Donald Logue's character was the whole situation of, he kind of shifted because of everything with Dex and just the circumstances of the case they were working on. But Carol kind of had a shift too, but I think that was because of Dex, and more so probably a conversation with Hoffman that kind of got her thinking of like, yeah, do I really want to be doing this forever? Like the dirty work, you know, the type of stuff. And it's so interesting too, because like when you meet her, she has like such a happy disposition, and then she gets super sassy and just like, like when you meet with her again, and I just like that. Like she had like such a bubbly personality when you first meet her, and I love that turned out to be like complete and utter BS. It's just neat to see someone but with a very bubbly personality next to Dex, who is very kind of like low key, kind of, you get what I'm trying to say? So I thought that was kind of a neat and interesting element to that. And I love how that all kind of ties into the episode, whether it be everything with Gray and Liz. Obviously things are kind of like getting, you know, started between them and everything, and Liz is like, oh, so can you give me a job at the bar? And it's like, oh, that's awkward. You guys started just becoming a thing, and you know, okay. But it seems like, hey, she's really good behind the bar, which obviously there's a thing of Dex kind of being, I'm very curious to see what that ends up becoming. Because obviously Liz got part of this, you know, because, you know, Gray kind of brought her into the investigation. It's like, oh, she's the one that actually helped me find Emma, which Dex didn't appreciate, because she's like, whoa, this is private investigating. This is supposed to be private. It's like, wait, here you go again. Why am I even bothering to talk to you? Like the fact that I'm wondering, is Dex not happy about this whole situation with Gray and Liz because she's had Gray to herself this entire time? Like the way they make it almost seem like Gray hasn't really been with anyone in that 6-year period. Maybe he has and we're just not aware of. We know Dex has kind of bounced around from people to people just because, you know, it's just, she doesn't want to settle down just because the last time she settled down, it just things didn't work out because obviously the whole Benny thing, that was a very complicated thing, but obviously that brought about some trauma that she just hasn't quite not willingly dealt with. So obviously she's, you know, she doesn't want anything serious because she's afraid she's going to implode it, hence why her and Gray have the situation and relationship they have. But I think for her, it's like, I don't want anyone coming in here kind of screwing up our thing. This has kind of been, you know, me, Gray, and Ansel. Like, it's been kind of our triangle. I don't need anybody making this a square or some other shape, you know. I think that might be an angle to it. Or maybe it's just simply the angle of, there is a part of her that does have feelings for Gray. Like, it's been prevalent, that episode where we learned about their past. You kind of see that, yeah, it is still there. It's just she might not be willing to admit it, and Gray might not be willing to admit it, but there is still something there. And even the thing is, she found that wedding ring in Gray's dresser, so it's like, so that kind of begs the question of like, does that puts a little damper in Liz and, you know, Gray's relationship. And that's also something, because that's something that Dex knows about, that she brought up to Gray. Like, is there anything else you're hiding? But he was kind of like, no. So, and for him, he looks at this as an opportunity of like, well, I think he's probably held that ring for so long, but it just never happened. So he was like, it's just never going to happen. And maybe he just couldn't bring himself to give it away, that type of thing. I don't know. Because even Liz was like, I think we should stay professional. I don't want to interfere between whatever you and Dex guys. Like, dude, me and Dex, we've got a friendship. Because, I mean, I don't think he ever explains it to her, because I'm sure that would complicate things a lot. But basically, he kind of talks about, like, oh, yeah, like, anything between them basically imploded within that first 24 hours. I don't think he went into 100% details, but as we know, it's like, yeah, things kind of basically imploded. But for him, it's like, yeah, she's important. She's a friend. Obviously, Ansel is very important to him, too. So, you know, he doesn't really expressly say it in this episode, but it is a thing of they are family, and they are very important to him. They're the most important people to him, which obviously, you know, in a new relationship, not be the most, it'd be a complicated thing to kind of, you know, pull that along, because that's kind of like a lot of baggage to carry, which is interesting because Liz kind of basically drops her baggage, which is kind of like, even Gray was like, is that, no, you're just messing with me. She's like, well, you kind of have to find out. Basically, she talks about the fact is that whoever she was with before burned her because he had a nervous breakdown while they were in like France, and said that she was his drug mule. And it's like, wait, what? And then it had the State Department had to get involved with her so she could get out of like the prison. She was locked up, what was it, like for 2 months. She came back, basically her entire life imploded. She lost her job, she lost everything. And I'm like, that sucks. What happened to that asshole? We never got the other side of that to find out, like, oh, what actually happened to him, you know? So there's that whole complicated thing. And then there's the whole little Friends Thanksgiving thing that they have. Obviously, Liz comes along with Gray. Hoffman drops by, which I thought was kind of interesting, because at first he was like, oh yeah, I want to come, can I meet your brother, because obviously I'd do anything to get away from my family Thanksgiving. She's like, sure. And almost kind of like, it was almost interesting that she was kind of okay with that immediately, because I thought there would have been a little more, I mean, there was hesitation, but I expect her to kind of come up with excuses, but maybe she tried to, but he quickly kind of jumped past those. So, which it was kind of a cute moment of her, him and Ansel and Hoffman got a meeting. He's like, so tell me she didn't cook you in this. Ansel's like, no way. It's like, good. Because, you know, my doctor's away, so I don't think I'd be in a good position. And it's like, they have a little laugh together. I'm like, oh, that's super cool. You know, so, and even like, you know, Gray is like, oh man, look at Liz. Isn't she great? Isn't she perfect? And Dex is like, yeah, she's kind of happy. He's like, what? And she's like, I don't know. You think something's mentally wrong with her? Which it seems like Dex is a bit of a sourpuss, but I think it's because what was kind of their tradition kind of got stepped on, which is like, I think it's a complicated thing of like, I want to be happy for Gray, but there's like, once again, this is our thing. Doesn't even seem like she's too happy at having Hoffman there, because it's just like, you know, which it's hard to say in that moment, whether it was like her being really happy, kind of taking a second to realize like, it's good to not have what I have right now, or is it just, it's shifting and it's different and that scares her maybe. I don't know. It's actually kind of sad when you actually think about it in the grand scheme of this episode, that the fact of the matter is not everything's like 100% resolved. Like, obviously Dan now knows about Jacob and Emma, but the fact of the matter is, like, where things stand, it's Emma's choice to decide whether or not she ever lets Jacob know. She's kind of set things up. And you know, I'm not trying to fault her in any shape or form. It's like, for her, this is what she wanted to do. This is what she decided, because that would have just been the whole complicated thing. And I'm curious to see if Dan will try to reach out. Like, maybe that'll be something we see kind of happen in the background. I mean, especially with home dude's name, what is it? Slocum. He has a very unique first name. I've never heard. Was it like, what is it, like Iluin or something like that? He has a very unique. I was like, I have never heard that first name ever. Is that a real first name? I think it probably is. Not that it's bad, it's just like, that's such a unique thing. But Solocum, like getting the state senate job and everything, so I'm thinking maybe that'll be something we see kind of more later on, maybe. I don't know. I should also throw this in there too about the whole situation of Dex and the whole Gray situation. She kind of throws shade on him earlier in the episode, because it's like, oh yeah, like, it's like, oh, you'd have my vote, like, because Gray was like, oh, Dan, I'd vote for you 10 times if I could, and you have Dex being like, yeah, but he can't, ex-felon, you know. And he was like, what the hell was that? She was like, I was trying to make small talk. He's like, yeah, don't do that small talk thing again. Which is almost kind of like, I don't know whether it's just because there's so much connected with like, oh, you didn't tell me everything about your situation. So she's kind of throwing that in his face, a little jab. I don't know if that's supposed to be more than what it is, or it might have been her attempt at small talk, legitimately. I mean, to be fair, it could be a combination of the two. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting episode in many different regards, and ultimately I'm curious to see kind of, you know, where all this ends up taking us going forward with all of this. Like I said, everything's kind of changing around Dex, and obviously Dex has kind of made more of a stamp on like what type of job she's willing to take and which one she's not. So I think that's kind of a nice step forward. But obviously, like I said, everything else is changing around her. The Liz situation is definitely going to be interesting to see what that ends up being, because like I figured like she was catching on to something the way Gray was like, "Come on, Dex," when he was calling her back when she was pissed at him, and Liz, and she'd already witnessed it beforehand too. So now it's a situation of like, okay, there's definitely something here that I don't want to get in the middle of, but it's like, I don't know, it's definitely going to be very, very interesting to see, you know, what ends up going down. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.